Everything Yowie. We finally got there, yes. Anyway, it wouldn't be an Everything Yowie without something going wrong. So we've got a special guest today, but before I introduce him, I'm going to introduce my partner in crime. He's the only Yowie researcher to ever wear a bush stuff shirt. He's the bearded thought biker from the nation's capital, Mr. David Reed.
Oh, thank you very much, Dan. And hello, Attila. I didn't get a chance to see you to say hello pre-show. But yeah, Dan, thank you very much. You need no introduction.
You can give me one time.
I'll write one out for the next show.
All right. So we've got a very special guest on today. He's a self-taught independent filmmaker. Some people call him a researcher, but he always says he's a filmmaker. He's been doing documentaries for over 20 years. And here he is. We finally got him on the show. Mr. Attila Kaldy. How you going, Attila?
Good, mate. G'day. G'day, Yowie, Dan, and Mr. Dave. How are you all?
Very good.
Very well.
Thanks for having me.
Before we ask you a few hard questions that you should be able to answer quite easily.
Hard questions, answering easily. That's no challenge. You can do better than that.
We're very professional here. Dave and myself, we just did a quick snap live about last Saturday night when Attila, you and myself and my wife, we went out to King Tablelands Road. So just want to tell what you heard, and then I'll just say what I seen after you explained to me what you heard in the bush.
Well, I think I might start with the technicals because I think that's very important, or it's an important part of what I heard and what I experienced, because without that, obviously, it wouldn't have happened. But I actually had a 3-meter boom mic, which I mounted to the roof platform of my vehicle. I've got a 4-wheel drive, so it's a high-set vehicle as it is. So I actually mounted that. So it was protruding over 3 meters plus, because of my vehicle's roughly about 2 meters in height. On top of that, I actually had what's known as a blimp, which is like a suspension. So you can actually put a boom mic inside that and move it around, and it suppresses any kind of sound. Sometimes when you actually have an external mic mounted to your camera and you move around, sometimes you hear this knocking, annoying sound. That's what that is. So this actually prevents that from happening. On top of that, what I actually had was what's known as a dead wombat or a windsock. So what that does is suppresses wind sound. And I had all that hooked up to an XLR cable to a preamp, external recorder. So with noise cancelling headphones, it actually works quite well, because you can really pump up the gain and listen to those sounds that are sort of really far away, that are deep in the actual bush itself. So actually can technically, because it's focus-based microphone, you can actually bypass a lot of the foreground sounds and just concentrate on the background. So we were there just before sunset. I actually heard these clicking sounds, and these clicking sounds I've heard before, and it sound like a conversation between two individuals. Now, I know that there are certain native tribes in Africa that actually use very similar vocabulary to communicate, but this was all click-based, so there wasn't any other form of vocalization. So there were different tones of clicking, suggesting that there was some kind of intelligent communication going on between two different animals or two different creatures. We know that there are certain animals in the Australian wilderness that have very similar type, they'll produce very similar sounds, but this was very different from anything else that you would natively hear in the Australian wilderness. And where the tones were and variations were changing, you can hear that there was a conversation between two individuals because they were responding to one another. And this, for me, sounded an alarm, and obviously focused on this. And I alerted Dan straight away that I'm actually hearing these sounds. And I think that's when you got your thermal imaging camera out.
Yeah. So you said you know you heard what you heard, and then so I've hopped over without the crutches, and that's when I didn't have it ready. As I explained to people, I didn't have it ready, like to focus, to peer right into the bush, and it was actually pretty steep, wasn't it, Attila? I don't know, was it like 45-degree angle kind of thing, like going down?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I probably went down about a good
About 8
20,
meters or
30,
something?
maybe 40 meters
Oh, okay.
into the scrub. And it does sort of taper down quite dramatically. So you really need to sort of watch your step and hold on to the next shrub or the next branch, So whatever was basically navigating through the dense wood, because it's quite dense. There's a lot of tea trees down there too. Eucalypt, of course, but there's also a lot of tea trees in between. So whatever was navigating obviously had its own path, and also knew the area quite well to navigate with that form of confidence, because there's no doubt if you're a human being and you're walking in that, there is no way that you would be walking without some form of optical aid or illumination. And not to mention, even if you did have some kind of illumination or optical aid, you'd be watching your step because of the steep angle, and not to mention, of course, the debris that's around there that can potentially, cause some havoc if you make the wrong step.
Yeah, so what I found was the hard, like as I was focusing, there's a lot of small bushes right in front of where we were, and I only had a small snippet to look into. So that's why I concentrated on that area straight away. And as I was getting it to focus, that's when I seen that big the heat signature just walking. And as soon as I got it focused, it was already gone. Like it was already gone. So I didn't want to film a blur. And by the time I noticed it was that quick. It was like by the time I thought, oh, I got to start recording, it was already gone. But it was like that big. It didn't fit in the whole lens of the thermal. Like I missed, it was only shown from about the knees to the head. And yeah, it was just a massive size. And straight away, I was just telling you, Attila, like I just seen one, and all the pins and needles were and the goosebumps all over my body. And I haven't felt like that for a long time, being out the bush researching these creatures. So when you see one, you still get that that feeling of, like, even from the first time you see one till probably the last time you'll ever see one, you still get the same feeling. That like you realize, wow, this thing is so big. So yeah, it was really interesting to actually witness that.
Absolutely.
Dan, did the creature that you saw, did it look like that AYR footage? Did it come across like that?
Yeah, exactly. I had on the heat signature, which is iron hot, so everything's like a bright yellow, exactly the same, because it is exactly the same thermal as what they've got. Because I had this one, and then Dean said, how does it work? I said, quite well. So he got one, so it was exactly the same model. So yeah, but I didn't see it like side on, like Buck managed to get it going down side on, picking something up and then turning, but I've only seen it side on, and the top of its arm was just massive and round. And I only seen one arm virtually, and it was virtually the left side, because it come from my left hand. So I'm sorry, from my right and walked to my left. But just the head was just massive in the screen too. And like it just had this massive head and massive shoulders, and it was just that tall. That's basically what I saw, and it moved that quick. So within 2 to 3 seconds, it was already covered. I reckon that what I was filming was probably about 10 meters in area, and it just covered that in like 2 or 3 seconds and was gone. And it didn't care about us. It didn't even look up. It just was walking and then wanted to go to that area, and nothing was stopping it, and nothing was getting in its way. The other ones we were hearing might have been smaller ones or just other ones in the area, but this boy, he was going up that way, northwards, and that's where, and he disappeared. I don't think he came back, because Attila did go up and try to film and couldn't see it with the thermal. But yeah, very interesting to finally see one.
But you got the impression, Attila, that these things, the noises they were making, there was more. There was definitely more than one. You know, is there 2 or 3? Did you think?
Oh, look, no, Dave, there are definitely more of them, and not just because of that conversation that I heard through the microphone, but also later on. And it's classical because I've actually experienced this before in the past, where when a bit of wind picks up, you can actually hear movement through the scrub. So there was movement on both ends of the trails. So it was almost like, you're being flanked from both ends. So there were movements on the lower end, and there was also movements on the upper end as well. So every time the wind picked up, you can definitely hear something taking a step, taking a step, taking a step. And then as the wind dies down, the step stops. And this is something I've actually experienced before in the Blue Mountains down in on Federal Pass, or not far from Federal Pass, back in 2013, which that's where we had rocks thrown at us. We were basically herded out of there. So that was quite an intense sort of experience, but it was reminiscent of that and other experiences I also had where they mask their steps in the wind or any kind of environmental noise, whether it's wind, whether it's thunder in the background, whether it's something else. But they tend to be very conscious about the way they move and the way they mask their movements so that you can't hear or identify where they are.
Right. Yeah. No, that's really clever. I mean, that's really
a bit
clever.
slow there.
I've never thought about that. Yeah, they move when the leaves are rustling.
Exactly.
If the wind stops, they stop. Yeah, that's really clever.
It's a trait that you'll probably see people in special forces like snipers and all that would use when they're sort of staking something out or where they're camped out somewhere. And if they do move, they generally move when there's wind, when there's other environmental factors or noise involved, so that you can actually mask your own movement. So obviously we've picked up very similar sort of, characteristics from nature to adopt that into our own use.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we seem to have lost Dan. He'll be back. He's got terrible internet, and I don't know what. He'll be back shortly anyway. But in the meantime, I might mention Moonlark Media and the where people can watch the 2 documentaries, Track and
Tracking the Law.
Tracking the Law.
Mm-hmm.
And it's available on Tubi, which is a free app. And yeah, very, very good quality and amazing documentaries.
Oh, okay, we're back.
Sorry.
No, you're back. We were just mentioning the Track and Tracking the Law documentaries on Tubi while you were missing.
All good, keep talking, but the internet here just sometimes says, that's enough, that's it, you're out of here, but it's only on Wi-Fi. I might fix it in the future, but yeah, keep talking what you're talking about. I'll let you go.
Thank you, Dave. I think, it was important to actually create something that was purely Australian, to tell an Australian story of, as the world knows, these creatures known as Bigfoot, or as we call them, Yowies here in Australia. I do believe that having an Australian chapter made by Australians, I think was important to do. And not to mention, having a very strong sort of Indigenous element to it, to have elders and the Indigenous community to sort of tell their own stories on the Yowie, because it's a very strong part. It's a strong part of their culture, and it always has been, and I believe it always will be. And it is held with great respect, and I think it was important to tell that side of the story. in the second part of in the second documentary film. And I was just very happy to actually, and privileged to actually have the opportunity to create these documentaries and to tell these stories.
Oh, that is fabulous. The documentaries, they're different to any of the documentaries I've seen made by outsiders, people from America, etc. They come through and they're all a bit ordinary, and I can tell in the first couple of minutes that they're pretty ordinary, and I usually turn them off because I've seen it all before. And that's the difference between your documentaries. It's that what always really impressed me was that it was such boots on the ground filmmaking. And I know, and others should know, that the lengths your team went to create those films, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, because I wouldn't want to be carrying all that equipment.
No, definitely not. Yeah, it was definitely hard yakka, and I mean, you guys know, especially Dan knows, what you need to carry when you're going on these expeditions to make sure that you have every form of resource that you need to cater for the right sort of moments, the right lighting conditions, and to make sure that you capture everything the right way.
Very good.
I want to ask a question. What was it that made you decide to make documentaries, and what was like the deciding factor? What was the inspiration?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't know. It's always been there. I don't think there was anything that kind of decided or gave me a decision to create documentaries. I remember that when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I made my own video camera out of a tissue box and a toilet roll and ran around the house, pretending to be a cameraman. I think documentaries are one of those things that you're telling a story of either a person or either an important, influential story that you can potentially educate people on. I think there are so many mysteries in this world that it would take more than a lifetime to go through go through a portion of what's out there. And I just, it's just something I always loved doing, I guess. Like I said, there was no deciding factor. It just was part of who I was.
Okay, cool.
And how did you meld? What was on the same question? What was the inspiration to make the track films?
Well, initially I did make a couple of. There was a series I shot called PI, or Paranormal Investigators Uncut, and actually does have a Yowie episode in there. I guess, look, it was just having these experiences over the years of, focusing more on aerial phenomena at the time and encountering, having these different really profound experiences, or some of them were profound experiences. It always sort of drew my interest. And then a good friend of mine, Don Mears, did a shoot once called, well, it was a series that was called The Spirit Level. And he did one on the Yowie. So I went out there with him, with another fellow, and we actually had this very primate-like vocalization, and we called back, tried to mimic the sound, and it sort of called back as well. So there was like, it was calling, and then we'd respond in a very similar way. So it's quite interesting, very interesting night. And then we decided back in 2013 that we'll go down into the valley, and I took a camera with me, and and then that's when things got pretty interesting for us down there. We had rocks thrown at us, big branches and so forth. And it was something that I was toying with because I had a whole bunch of projects already running. And I think basically it was just finding the right person, and Dan came in, and we had a meeting, and Dan showed me his videos and his recordings and everything else, and that's basically where it started from.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well done, Dan. Well done, Attila.
Thank you. I'm just writing an answer to someone. Another question was, like, what was the most dangerous or scariest thing that you've had to deal with while out shooting any type of footage for a documentary or show?
Well, where do I start? Well, there was one where I was shot at. So that was quite interesting. We were filming a segment out at Penrose State Forest, and we got shot at. And I had my daughter with me too, who's actually in the film industry as well. So that was one interesting moment. Being surrounded potentially by a cult in Europe, trying to get out of there alive was a very interesting experience. You can actually watch that in, of course, another episode of Paranormal Investigators Uncut, which is on Tubi. Wow, yeah, there was quite a few, but I guess those to the top. They're definitely the two that top the rest.
Oh, geez. Any question? Your turn, Dave.
My turn. No, I've exhausted my questions. I'll pop questions in as Attila goes on.
This is probably the most important question, or second most. Mobile phones, and they're being used for taking pictures while out, in the bush. What can you tell us about the difference between a camera and a phone camera? What's the big difference? Like, why shouldn't they be used out in the bush to take like Yowie pictures, and what makes them blurry and all that?
Well, look, I mean, I don't discourage people at all from using if they're out in a scrub, because if you get something that's reasonably close to you that has reasonable detail, let's say the prop sits within close proximity and you're confident you can get reasonable detail, there's nothing wrong with having a phone. The problem is with a phone is that that if you actually take a photo of an environment and you're trying to zoom in, you will get all sorts of artifacts. The reason why is because the phones have got tiny little image sensors, very, very small. And they're only a portion to the size of, let's say, if you have like something that I have, like a Canon 5D Mark III, which is a full frame sensor, that's almost 4 or 5, maybe 6 times larger than the sensor, maybe even more than a image sensor that's on a mobile phone. Even though the mobile phone sensors have come a long way, the actual quality that you're going to get is going to be nowhere near than having a professional camera at hand. So where you can actually take a photo with, let's say, a full frame image sensor, I'm not going to get involved in the technicals, but where you do have a camera with a full frame sensor, you can actually zoom in and get details from that. Quite reasonable details, even from something that you may pick up at a certain distance. Where if you try to do the same thing with an image sensor or with a camera or with an image that's taken by a camera on a mobile phone, because of the image sensor reduces the amount of light and detail that comes in, you're going to get nothing more than artifacts and weird things that you may misinterpret as either something ambiguous in the wilderness. So if what I would always recommend to people, if they're that interested in obtaining irrefutable evidence, image evidence of a yowie or any kind of animal, look into getting into wildlife photography and invest a bit of money into getting a good secondhand camera and maybe even a telephoto lens. Or if you wish, you can get something like a 24 to 70 mil as a starter and just go around and taking photos, because you'll get more detail out of that than you will out of a mobile phone.
Okay. Well, that's actually obvious from what's posted on the Facebook groups. They seem to take a photo or zoom all the way in with their digital zoom, and it's just could be anything. Could be a Big Mac, but I've got a camera. I've got a Lumix, and but it's digital zoom, and it's very clear, even fully zoomed in, and it makes all the difference. I agree.
Yeah, I would probably stick to optical zoom, because once you get into digital zoom, you'll start getting distortions, because it's trying to compensate for things that it can't pick up optically, like through your optical zoom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Attila, what cameras do you use to film all your documentaries and anything that you're filming?
Well, I recently used Blackmagic cameras. I've always been a big fan of Canon cameras, Canon cinema cameras. So effectively, what I found is that the Blackmagic cameras and the Canon cinema cameras kind of really complement each other. I've got a Canon C70 cinema camera, so the color science in that is very, very similar to that of the Blackmagic 4K or even Blackmagic 6K. So it's very easy to match in post-production when you're doing color correcting or even color grading, because we do that to make the details pop, obviously. So yeah, and they're all like 10-bit cameras. You get that information that you really need, and you shoot. Obviously, we shoot in 4K, and sometimes we do down sample to HD, because you'll find that a lot of distributors only really take on high definition final cuts. So your delivery needs to be in high definition. Some of them will take UHD, but most of them still prefer high definition. In fact, you'll find that a lot of streaming platforms, because of the quality of the internet, actually streams in high definition if you're lucky. So getting 4K out of streaming services is a hard push unless you've got really good internet.
Okay, we've got a question, and everyone can answer this one. It's from Andrew, and it says, Attila, do you find that thermals are essential kit for researching?
Absolutely. Look, you would not have seen, Dan, that creature without thermal aid. Dean's team would not have picked up from AYR, would not have picked up those creatures, which was, I believe, is a fantastic catch, without thermal aid. Thermal aid allows you to penetrate into the bush, especially at nighttime, without using light or anything else. And I think it's an essential tool to have.
So you've been saying that too, Dave. When I first got it, you said this is going to be a game changer, because they do not know that you can see them, when they've known for a long time that we don't have that capability, but their eyes do. So.
Oh yeah, no, that's my belief. Anyway, I believe they know you can't see them in the dark. They know you're blind at night. That's my belief, and that's why the thermal camera. It's a bit like you said there before. I was going to ask you the question that this thing was wandering along and it didn't recognise you, didn't turn towards you guys. So one, either it knew you were there and didn't care because you couldn't see it, or it didn't see you at all. So, which do you think it was?
Oh, I think it knew we were there, just didn't care. He had a mission, and it was going not where we were, going away from us. Right. That's what it looked like. Yeah, it looked like it was on a mission. It was like moving that quick, that it wasn't trying to get away behind trees. It was already just going that way till it come into view, into the thermal view, and just kept going. And I just got that little snippet. So unfortunately, your lesson learned that when I go out as I'm going out, I'll try and get the thermal kind of, because one thing you do is the front of the thermal. It's weird because you got the bushes and there's different bushes, small ones, big ones, and you got to keep on moving it to adjust it so it will get a clear picture with in front of you or further away. So you're hoping try to keep it recording stuff from further away because that's you're thinking something's not going to be right near you. But the problem is it's really dark, and it's just like a musical instrument. You got to use it without even using your eyes. You got to know, you feel for the buttons, and you got to use them. And if you stuff something up, you got to wait a few seconds before you can reuse that mode again. So yeah, I think he was just going on his way. I don't think he was gonna hang around and see us. But we did have a few other things happen that night. Didn't you hear like a chatter noise, like a noise, Attila?
Well, that was the chatter that I originally picked up between the two creatures. I did hear something similar further down, or rather further up the road, because I did go down the trail as well, beyond the gate, and which you can, but you can only. There is a sign there that says that only hikers beyond a certain point. So, but further up, yeah, I did hear something very similar again, but it was very difficult because obviously we had wind. There were other factors involved as well. So, yeah. So look. I think it's. I can say with confidence that there was more than one, and there was definitely some form of communication that was going on.
Yeah. Okay. A question some people have asked me, what do you have planned for the future? And are you shooting anything now? And do you have any plans for another Yowie doco?
Yeah, I'm actually in the process. We're actually working on a documentary. Cade Moyer of Believe in Paranormal UFO podcast. We've actually joined teams to shoot a new documentary called Dark Truths, and we're in the process of post-production at the moment, cutting it together. We're hoping to have it ready in the next few months, this side of the year, actually, or this side of June. So that's what I'm working on. I'm working on another documentary called Archived, which is a UFO-based documentary. But yeah, there is something in the pipeline, something it's a little bit more basic than tracking the law, but I think that there's an interesting story there that I think it's worth exploring. So and that will potentially be cryptid base as well. So yeah, keep a lookout for that.
Very good.
Any more questions for you, Dave?
No, but I've been fascinated tonight by Attila's commentary, and I've also fascinated by you guys' experience the other night. That just the absolute shame that the thermals aren't autofocus.
Yeah,
So
maybe some that are worth more money or in the future.
Yeah.
Well, we have seen a lot of weird stuff while we've been out there doing, especially track search for Australia's Bigfoot. Like we've seen some weird things that have just come out of the bush or that have happened to, and it's not just one of us that has seen these things. It's been 2 or 3 people seeing them. So, everyone can back up the stories that that we're telling. But one last question, and this is the hardest question of all, Attila. Do you hike in thongs, or you've ever hiked in thongs?
No, I've never hiked in thongs, and I don't intend to.
I'm gonna have to teach you how to hike in thongs.
If I do, please institutionalize me.
Don't do it, Attila. Don't do it. It's a trap.
Hey, Dave's the thong god. He taught me, so we've got to pass it on. So anyway, Attila, thanks very much for taking the time out to join Dave and myself on Everything Yowie, and hopefully everyone's enjoyed watching this live or later on. So once again, thanks, Attila. And
Yeah, thank you, Attila.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
And anyway, have a good night, and we'll see you all again next time with another guest, hopefully, or maybe just me and Dave dribbling as usual. See yous. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.